The wind rushed past my ears as I plummeted, my arms wrapped protectively around my son Jake. Just moments earlier, we had been posing for a family photo at Ravens Point. Then came the push from behind my own parents and sister Amy, their faces cold and determined. We crashed onto a rocky ledge 30 feet below. Through waves of pain, Jake pressed his lips to my ear. "Mom, don't move yet," he whispered urgently. "They need to think we died." Somehow, my 6-year-old knew our lives depended on this deception. I never wanted to reconnect with my family. 5 years of minimal contact had been healing for both me and Jake. The occasional birthday card or holiday text message was the extent of our relationship, and I preferred it that way. My parents, Richard and Linda Davis, had always been controlling. Growing up in our suburban Pennsylvania home, I lived by their rigid rules and impossibly high standards. My sister Amy, 2 years younger, had always been their favorite. While I struggled to meet their expectations, she effortlessly became the golden child who could do no wrong. When I got pregnant with Jake at 24, they demanded I marry his father or give the baby up for adoption. I refused both options. Jake's father wanted nothing to do with us, and I would never give up my child. That decision fractured our already strained relationship, and I moved 3 hours away to start a new life. I built something beautiful for us. My small graphic design business grew steadily, allowing me to buy a modest 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood with good schools. Jake thrived in kindergarten, making friends easily with his quick smile and kind heart. We were a perfect team, just the two of us. Then disaster struck. My business partner, Heather, embezzled nearly $200,000 from our company accounts before disappearing. The business collapsed overnight. I was left with mounting debts, legal fees, and a rapidly dwindling savings account. I was applying for food stamps when my mother called out of the blue. "Sheila, your father and I heard about your business troubles," she said, her voice uncharacteristically warm. "We want to help you get back on your feet." I was suspicious. "How did you even find out?" "Small-town news travels. A client of your father's mentioned it." She paused. "We've been thinking a lot about you and Jake. We've missed so much of his life. He must be what, 6 now?" "Yes," I replied, surprised she remembered. "We'd like to make things right, Sheila. Your father is updating his will, and we want to make sure you and Jake are properly included. Plus, we can help with your immediate financial situation." The timing couldn't have been worse. Pride told me to refuse, but practicality won out. I needed help, and if they were finally willing to act like actual parents, maybe it was worth a try. Jake was ecstatic when I told him. Real grandparents? Like in the books we read? His excitement made me feel guilty for keeping him away from them for so long. Our reunion dinner at my parents' house was awkward but cordial. My mother hugged me stiffly, while my father gave me an approving nod, as if I'd finally done something right by showing up. Jake charmed them instantly, proudly showing off his reading skills and dinosaur knowledge. Amy arrived late, her thin smile not reaching her eyes as she hugged me. "Little sis looks all grown up," she said, though I was older. Something about her felt different. Her designer clothes and diamond earrings spoke of wealth I hadn't seen before. After dinner, while Jake played with toys my parents had bought him, Amy cornered me in the kitchen. "So, the big, shot entrepreneur came crawling back," she said quietly, sipping her wine. "I'm just trying to do what's best for Jake," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Of course. Family first, right?" Her tone was light but her eyes were cold. "Mom and Dad talk about you more than you'd think. They've been saving for Jake's college fund all these years." That surprised me. "They have?" Before she could answer, I noticed movement in the dining room. Amy had left her purse open on the table, and from my angle, I could see my financial statements partially hidden inside. The same documents I'd left in my tote bag upon arrival. I waited until Amy went to the bathroom, then checked my bag. Several papers were missing. I confronted her when she returned. "Were you going through my financial documents?" Amy didn't even blink. "Mom and Dad asked me to help organize the family finances. They want to know exactly what you need. You could have asked. Would you have shown me?" She smiled. "Besides, it's just family helping family. Isn't that what you came here for? Something felt wrong, but Jake's laughter from the living room reminded me why I was doing this. For him, I could endure a little discomfort and suspicion. Fine, I said. Just ask next time. Of course, Amy replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're all about transparency now. The next evening, my parents insisted on hosting another family dinner before our hiking trip the following day. I'd agreed to an overnight stay at Blackwater National Park, supposedly to bond as a family. My father claimed it was his favorite place, though I had no memory of us ever visiting during my childhood. The dining room table was set with the good china, a level of formality that seemed excessive. Jake sat beside me, swinging his legs and chattering about the hiking adventure ahead. Will there be bears? He asked my father. Dad chuckled. No bears, but plenty of beautiful views. I've already packed some binoculars for you, sport. I noticed how my parents lavished attention on Jake, ignoring how uncomfortable it made him. They barely knew him, yet acted as if they'd been present his whole life. We've been discussing setting up that college fund we mentioned, my mother said, serving roast chicken. No grandson of ours will have to worry about student loans. That's generous, I replied carefully. But unnecessary right now. Let's focus on getting through the current situation first. Amy arrived with a man I hadn't met before, a tall, thin guy with nervous eyes who she introduced as Travis. He shook my hand limply and avoided direct eye contact. Travis works at the bank with me, Amy explained. Junior investment advisor. Nice to meet you, I said, noting how he flinched slightly when Amy placed her hand on his arm. Their relationship dynamic seemed off somehow. Throughout dinner, Jake kept whispering to me. He'd become unusually clingy since we'd arrived at my parents' house. What's wrong? I asked him quietly when we went to get dessert from the kitchen. I heard up talk that was confusing, he said, his small brow furrowed. What kind of talk? Aunt Amy told Travis something about papers and money and you. It sounded like a secret. Before I could probe further, my father called us back to the dining room. Through the doorway, I saw him quickly end a phone call, then slip a business card into his pocket. I recognized the card's design. It belonged to Walter Green, our family lawyer since I was a child. After dessert, my mother pulled me aside. Your father and I would like you to sign some papers for the family trust. Just formalities. She slid a thick document across the counter. When I began to read it, she waved her hand dismissively. It's just standard legal language. Walter drew it up today. I'd still like to read it first, I insisted. She sighed dramatically. Always so difficult, Shelia. We're trying to help you, not trick you. I took the papers to read later, though I had no intention of signing anything without proper review. While gathering my and Jake's belongings, I noticed a folder left open on the desk in my father's study. Inside were travel insurance documents with mine and Jake's names prominently displayed. My unease grew when I found the family sorting through hiking gear with unusual attention to detail. My father was checking and rechecking a map of Ravens Point, circling a particular lookout spot repeatedly. Amy approached me later that evening, her smile tight. Travis won't be joining us tomorrow. Work emergency. That's too bad, I replied, watching her carefully. Later that night, after putting Jake to bed in the guest room, I discovered a document that made my blood run cold. My parents had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on me without my knowledge or consent. The policy listed them as beneficiaries, with a payout of $1 million. I confronted my father in his study, waving the paper in his face. What is this? He seemed startled, but recovered quickly. Part of our making amends, Shelia. Life insurance is a responsible choice for a single parent. If anything happened to you, Jake would be taken care of. By you? Without my consent? We were going to tell you once everything was finalized. No need to be dramatic. I wanted to leave immediately, to grab Jake and run, but it was nearly midnight. We had no car, and the nearest hotel was miles away. I decided we would get through the night, make an excuse to skip the hike in the morning, and leave for good. Sleep was impossible as my mind raced through scenarios, each more disturbing than the last. What were they planning? Had I walked my son right into danger by coming here? The morning dawned gray and chilly. Weather reports warned of possible thunderstorms in the afternoon, but my father dismissed these concerns. The forecast is always overly cautious, he said, packing the car. We'll be back before any real weather hits. Jake clung to me during breakfast. His earlier excitement about hiking completely vanished. Do we have to go, Mom? He whispered as I helped him tie his shoes. What's wrong, buddy? You were looking forward to this yesterday. He glanced toward the kitchen where my parents and Amy were preparing trail snacks. I don't want to go to the high place. What high place? The place in the picture Grandpa showed me. He said we'd take a special picture there today. I hadn't seen any such photograph, and Jake's sudden anxiety amplified my own concerns. The drive to Blackwater National Park took nearly an hour. My father chose Ravens Point Trail, which the guidebook described as moderately difficult with steep sections and dramatic cliff views. It was notably remote, with warnings about limited cell service. Shouldn't we start with something easier? For Jake's sake? I suggested. He's a strong boy, my father replied, checking a large backpack. Besides, the view is worth it. As we prepared to leave the parking area, I noticed my mother insisting I bring my wallet in case of emergency. What kind of emergency would require my driver's license on a hiking trail? I asked. Identification. Standard safety procedure, she answered too quickly. Amy kept scanning the nearly empty parking lot. Not many people here today, she remarked, sounding pleased. Tourist season doesn't pick up for another few weeks, my father said. We'll have the trails to ourselves. That statement did nothing to ease my growing paranoia. As we began hiking, my parents led the way, with Amy behind them. I kept Jake close, bringing up the rear where I could watch everyone. The trail started gently enough, but soon became steeper and rockier. My father pushed us at a brisk pace, checking his watch frequently. We passed a park ranger station that was closed for the season, its windows dark and shuttered. 2 hours in, we veered off the main trail onto a less maintained path marked Ravens Point Lookout. This isn't on the public trail map, I noted, examining the worn signpost. It's a local secret, Amy said. The view is spectacular. Jake was unusually quiet, staying right by my side. When Amy attempted to take his hand at one point, he shrank back against me. What's wrong, Jake? She asked with exaggerated concern. Don't you want to walk with your Aunt Amy? He shook his head vigorously. I put a protective arm around him. He's tired, I said. Though exhaustion wasn't what I read in his eyes, it was fear. As we climbed higher, Jake tugged at my sleeve and whispered so quietly, I barely heard him. I heard Aunt Amy tell Travis something scary. What did she say? I asked, keeping my voice low. She said, after today, all her money comes to us, and no one will ever know. My blood turned to ice. I stopped walking, letting my parents and sister get a few steps ahead. When did you hear this, Jake? Last night. I got up to use the bathroom, and they were in the kitchen. I fought to keep my expression neutral while my mind raced. The life insurance policy, the remote trail, the way they'd maneuvered to get us here. It all suddenly made terrifying sense. Jake, listen to me very carefully, I whispered, crouching to his level. Stay right by my side. If I tell you to run, you run, okay? He nodded, his eyes wide, but trusting. There you two are, my mother called back. Hurry up! We're almost at the lookout point. With lead in my stomach and Jake's hand firmly in mine, I followed them toward what I now suspected was a trap. This is it, my father announced proudly, as we emerged onto a rocky outcrop, Ravens Point. The view was undeniably spectacular. The cliff edge dropped away into a steep ravine, with mountains rolling into the distance. Under different circumstances, it might have been breathtaking. Now it only filled me with dread. Perfect spot for a family photo, my mother suggested, her voice unnaturally bright. Richard, set up the camera. My father busied himself with a small tripod, while Amy approached me and Jake. You two should stand by the edge, she said. That way we'll get the full view behind you. I don't think that's safe, I replied, holding Jake closer. Don't be silly, Amy insisted, taking my arm with surprising strength. The edge is totally solid. We come here all the time. I resisted, but my mother joined in. Shelia, stop being difficult. We want a nice photo to commemorate our reunion. My father had positioned the tripod about 15 feet from the edge. Just a few steps closer to the edge, he directed. I need to frame the shot properly. They were maneuvering us into position, and I felt trapped. Jake squeezed my hand 3 times our secret code for I love you. His small face was pale but determined. Fine, I said finally, allowing Amy to guide us closer to the edge, but keeping Jake on the inside, away from the drop. Perfect, my father said, adjusting the camera. Amy, go stand with them. Linda and I will join after I set the timer. Amy came to stand beside me, positioning herself behind us. I felt her hands lightly touch my back, as if steadying me. Smile, my father called. I heard the camera beep as he set the timer. He and my mother walked quickly toward us. Something in their movement sent alarm bells ringing through my mind. They weren't slowing down. In that split second of realization, I turned to grab Jake, to run, but it was too late. I felt Amy's hands plant firmly against my back, shoving with all her strength. Simultaneously, my parents reached us, each pushing from a different angle. Their faces were masks of cold determination. We were airborne. Jake's scream mingled with my own as we plummeted over the edge. I clutched him to my chest, twisting my body to take the brunt of the inevitable impact, to shield him with everything I had. The fall lasted both an eternity and no time at all. We crashed onto a rocky ledge about 30 feet below the cliff edge. Pain exploded through my body as I felt ribs crack and my left leg bend unnaturally. Jake landed partially on top of me, the impact knocking the breath from both of us. Through waves of blinding pain, I heard voices from above. Can you see them? My mother's voice, strangely calm. They landed on that ledge, my father replied. Not moving. Are they dead? Amy asked bluntly. Has to be. That fall would break their necks, my father answered. No one could survive that. I fought to remain conscious as darkness threatened to engulf me. Jake stirred slightly in my arms. Thank God he was alive. I opened my eyes a crack to check him, and found him looking at me intensely, a finger pressed to his lips. He leaned in, his lips touching my ear. Mom, don't move yet, he whispered, his voice barely audible. They need to think we died. How did my 6-year-old understand what was happening better than I had? I closed my eyes again, forcing my body to go limp despite the screaming pain. I'm taking pictures, Amy called out. For evidence. Camera clicks punctuated the silence. I heard her voice again, businesslike and cold. This will support the story. They were taking a photo. Sheila lost her balance, grabbed for Jake, and they both fell. Such a terrible accident, my mother said in a rehearsed voice that turned my stomach. We tried to warn her not to stand so close to the edge. No one will question it, my father agreed. Especially with those social media posts Amy set up. Everyone will think she was depressed about losing her business. We should call 911 now, my mother suggested. Report the accident. Not from here, my father replied. No cell service, remember? We need to hike back to the ranger station first. That adds credibility to our story. The desperate attempt to get help. What about the bodies? Amy asked. Recovery teams will handle that. It's too dangerous for us to climb down. We did what we could, but tragically, it was too late. Their voices grew softer as they moved away from the edge. I heard shuffling, and the sounds of backpacks being gathered. How long before we call it in? Amy asked. 2 hours minimum, my father answered. We need the timing to be believable. We hiked out as fast as we could to get help. Then came the sound of retreating footsteps, and finally, silence. Jake shifted slightly in my arms. I opened my eyes to find him staring at me, his face scratched and dirty, but his eyes clear and focused. They're gone, Mom, he whispered. But we should stay quiet a little longer. They might come back to check. I nodded, trying to assess our injuries without moving too much. My left leg was definitely broken, the bone possibly protruding through the skin. Several ribs were fractured, making each breath agony. My right shoulder had taken much of the impact, and felt dislocated. Jake had fared slightly better, protected by my body, but his left arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. We lay in silence for what felt like an eternity, listening for any sign that my family might return. Finally, Jake pulled something from his jacket pocket with his good hand. "I recorded them, Mom," he whispered, showing me his tablet. I started recording when Aunt Amy came to stand behind us. I stared at him in disbelief. "You had your tablet with you?" He nodded. "I put it in my jacket because I was scared. I wanted to record in case they did something bad." I felt a surge of both pride and heartbreak. My 6-year-old son had been more prepared for treachery than I had been. "Let me hear it," I whispered. Jake pressed play, keeping the volume low. Through the tinny speaker came Amy's voice, chillingly clear. "Remember, we need to make it look like she jumped with the kid. The insurance won't pay for suicides, but they will for accidents. 1 million to split 3 ways, plus whatever's left of her business assets once we execute the power of attorney." "We know the plan, Amy," my mother's voice replied. "Just make sure you push hard enough. We only get one chance at this." Jake stopped the recording, his eyes wide. "Why would they want to hurt us, Mom?" I pulled him closer with my good arm, ignoring the stab of pain. "Money, baby. They wanted money." Tears filled my eyes, not from pain, but from the incomprehensible reality that my own parents and sister had just tried to murder us for financial gain. How could I ever explain that level of evil to my innocent son? But there was no time for those questions now. Somehow, we had to survive. We waited another 30 minutes before daring to move, making sure my family was truly gone. Each shift of position sent waves of agony through my body, but we couldn't stay on the exposed ledge. "Mom, you're really hurt," Jake whispered, his eyes filling with tears as he fully saw my injuries in the harsh daylight. "I'll be okay," I lied, trying to sit up. The movement sent such intense pain through my leg that I nearly blacked out. "We need to find a way off this ledge." "I think I can see a path," Jake said, carefully moving to the edge of our rocky shelf. "There's like a small trail going down over there." He pointed to what appeared to be a narrow animal track descending from the far end of our ledge. It was barely visible, the kind of route a child might notice but adults would overlook. "Good eye, buddy. Can you check if my phone survived the fall?" "It's in my back pocket." Jake carefully retrieved my phone. The screen was shattered, and it wouldn't turn on. "It's broken," he said, his face falling. "What about your tablet? Does it have service?" Jake checked. "No bars, Mom." "Of course not. My father had specifically chosen a location with no cell service. The perfect place for an accident, with no possibility of calling for help." Jake sat beside me, his broken arm cradled against his chest. His little face was unnaturally serious as he showed me his tablet again. "I heard more things I didn't tell you before," he said. "Aunt Amy was talking to Travis last night when they thought I was asleep." "What did they say?" "She told him that Grandma and Grandpa were going to get your house when you were gone, and she would get your business stuff. Travis asked if it was really necessary to get rid of us both." Jake swallowed hard. Aunt Amy said I was just collateral damage. The cold calculation behind their plan made me physically ill. They had planned everything meticulously. "Mom, look," Jake said suddenly, tapping something on his tablet. "Aunt Amy's using your phone." He showed me the screen where he'd logged into my cloud account. Someone was accessing my email and social media accounts. "She's posting things that make it look like you were really sad," Jake said, showing me a status update that had just appeared on my social media profile. The post read, "Sometimes I wonder if Jake would be better off without me. I've failed him in so many ways. Maybe he deserves better than what I can give him." "She's setting up a suicide narrative," I whispered, horror dawning. "They're covering their tracks." The temperature was dropping as clouds gathered overhead, the promised afternoon storms approaching. We needed shelter and medical attention, but first, we had to get off this ledge. "Jake, I need you to be my eyes. Is there anything useful in your backpack? Anything we could use?" He emptied his small dinosaur, print backpack, a water bottle, granola bars, his tablet, a small first aid kit my mother had insisted he carry just in case, and a dinosaur flashlight. "The first aid kit might help," I said, trying to sound more hopeful than I felt. "Can you open it?" Inside were basic supplies, band, aids, antiseptic wipes, gauze, and thankfully, some painkillers. I recognized the adult strength tablets my mother occasionally took for migraines. These will help with the pain, I said, swallowing too dry. Now we need to stabilize your arm before we try to move. I guided Jake through creating a simple sling, using his extra shirt from his backpack. Despite his own pain, he followed my instructions perfectly, his face set in concentration. What about your leg, Mom? And your ribs? We'll have to do our best, I said, tearing strips from my own jacket to bind my ribs. For my leg, I needed something to serve as a splint. There's a broken branch over there, Jake pointed. He retrieved it, and together we managed to secure it against my broken leg, using more strips of fabric. By the time we finished these makeshift first aid measures, the painkillers had taken the edge off, making movement possible, if not comfortable. Now for the hard part, I said, looking toward the narrow path Jake had spotted. We need to get off this ledge before the storm hits, or before they potentially come back to check on us. I can help you, Jake said, with a determination that broke my heart. No 6-year-old should have to be this brave or this grown up. With Jake supporting me on my good side, I managed to stand, putting minimal weight on my broken leg. Each movement was excruciating, but the alternative staying put and waiting to be found was unthinkable. The path Jake had discovered was treacherous, barely 12 inches wide in places, winding down the cliffside. For an adult, it would be challenging under normal circumstances. With my injuries, it seemed nearly impossible. I'll go first, Jake said. I can tell you where to put your feet. Inch by agonizing inch, we began our descent. Jake moved with the natural agility of a child, even with his broken arm, finding footholds I would have missed. He called out instructions, helping me navigate the narrow trail. Big rock coming up. Step down about 1 foot. There's a good spot for your hand right there. The journey that might have taken 20 minutes under normal circumstances took us nearly 2 hours. By the time we reached the bottom, the first raindrops were falling, and darkness was approaching. We found ourselves in a densely wooded area at the base of the cliff. The main trail was somewhere above and behind us. We had effectively gone off trail, and would be difficult to find if anyone was actually looking for survivors. We need shelter, I said, scanning the area. Somewhere to wait out the storm. What about there? Jake pointed to what appeared to be a man-made structure partially hidden among the trees about 100 yards away. As we approached, we discovered an old hunter's cabin, long abandoned but still structurally sound. The door hung loosely on rusted hinges, but the roof appeared intact. It was the best option we had. Inside, the cabin was dusty but dry. A simple wooden table, a couple of chairs, and an old cot were the only furniture. No electricity, no running water, but it was shelter from the storm now raging outside. I collapsed onto the cot, my strength finally giving out. Jake immediately set to work, his instincts for survival surpassing what any child his age should possess. He found an old wool blanket in a trunk, shook out the dust, and laid it over me. You rest, Mom. I'll keep watch. As the rain pounded on the roof, Jake showed me more of what he'd discovered on his tablet. Amy had been systematically accessing my accounts for weeks, gathering information and slowly isolating me from my support network. She sent emails to your friends pretending to be you, Jake explained, showing me messages I'd never written, declining invitations, or canceling plans. And she told your business contacts you were taking time off for mental health reasons. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't a spontaneous crime of opportunity. It was a meticulously planned murder plot months in the making. She's been planning this since before they contacted us, I realized aloud. The business failure just gave them the perfect opportunity. Through the tablet, we could see news alerts beginning to appear about missing hikers at Blackwater National Park, feared dead in tragic accident. The narrative was being established exactly as they'd planned. I scrolled through Jake's tablet further and found messages between Amy and Travis. He was clearly uncomfortable with the plan, asking repeatedly if there was another way to solve the problem. Amy's responses were chilling in their calculation. Just a little push, and all our money problems are solved. Besides, she's been depressed for months. Everyone will believe she jumped. Jake curled up beside me on the cot, his small body shivering despite the blanket. What are we going to do, Mom? I held him close, careful of our injuries. We're going to survive, and then we're going to make sure they pay for what they did. But we need to be smart about it. Running directly to the authorities wasn't the best move. My family had established their narrative carefully. Without proper evidence, it would be our word against theirs, the word of a financially struggling single mother, with supposedly suicidal tendencies, against 3 respectable adults with a consistent story. We need to document everything, I told Jake. And we need to approach this strategically. Outside, the storm raged on, matching the turmoil in my heart. My own parents had tried to kill their daughter and grandson for money. The betrayal was almost too enormous to comprehend. But as I held my brave, brilliant son close, I made a silent vow. They would not get away with this. We would survive, and justice would be served. Morning came with clearing skies and slightly less pain. The painkillers had worn off hours ago, but exhaustion had eventually pulled me into fitful sleep. I woke to find Jake already up, organizing our meager supplies on the small table. I checked outside, he reported. No people anywhere. But I found a stream, with clean water. He'd refilled our water bottle and laid out the remaining granola bars, 2 each. It wasn't much, but it would have to sustain us. I have a plan, I told him after we'd eaten. But first, we need to get moving. Using a sturdy branch Jake found as a makeshift crutch, I tested my mobility. The pain was still intense, but manageable enough to allow slow progress. Jake fashioned a better sling for his arm using strips from the blanket. Which way, Mom? I considered our options. Heading back to the main trail risked encountering my family or search parties they'd initiated. Instead, I pointed in the opposite direction. The ranger station we passed. If we can reach it, there might be a radio or first aid supplies. It was a gamble, but our best option. According to my mental map of the park, the ranger station should be within a couple of miles if we cut across rather than following the trails. Our progress was agonizingly slow. What would normally be a 40-minute hike stretched into 4 hours of careful navigation through underbrush and over uneven terrain. Jake led the way, scouting the easiest path for me to follow with my improvised crutch. By midday, the ranger station came into view, a small log cabin structure with a radio antenna on the roof. As expected, it was closed for the season, but a back window had a loose latch that Jake was small enough to slip through. "Be careful," I warned as he squeezed through the opening. Moments later, he unlocked the door from inside. The station was basic, but equipped with the essentials: a 2-way radio, first aid supplies, maps, and emergency rations. I collapsed into a chair while Jake explored. "The radio doesn't work," he reported after trying the controls. "But there's lots of medical stuff. The first aid kit here was professional grade." We properly cleaned and bandaged our wounds, splinted Jake's arm correctly, and I found stronger painkillers in the emergency medical supplies. "Mom, look at this," Jake called, holding up his tablet. He'd connected to the station's emergency satellite internet system, slow but functional. The local news websites were already reporting on our tragedy. There were photographs of my parents and Amy, grief-stricken faces, perfectly composed for the cameras as they described the horrible accident that had claimed their daughter and grandson. "She was standing too close to the edge for a photo," my mother was quoted saying. "We warned her, but she insisted. Then she just lost her balance. It happened so fast." She grabbed for Jake as she fell. The calculated performance made me physically ill. They were playing their roles perfectly, establishing the narrative they'd carefully constructed. But Jake had more to show me. "Look at all the stuff Aunt Amy's been doing," he said, pulling up records of activity on my accounts. Over the past 3 months, Amy had been systematically accessing my personal and business emails, social media, and even banking information. Using credential recovery options and her knowledge of my personal details, she'd gained access to nearly every aspect of my digital life. "She's been sending emails to all your business contacts," Jake showed me, "telling them you're having a breakdown and need time away." I scrolled through dozens of messages I'd never written, all crafted to isolate me professionally and personally. Amy had been laying groundwork for months, establishing a pattern of erratic behavior and depression that would make suicide believable. "And look at this," Jake continued, showing me documents that had been attached to emails between Amy and my parents. They changed Grandpa's will 3 weeks ago. Everything goes to Aunt Amy now, except your house and life insurance, which go to Grandma and Grandpa. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was a calculated conspiracy involving months of planning. Most disturbing were the messages between Amy and her boyfriend Travis. While Amy had been the architect of the plan, Travis had expressed reservations. "I don't know if I can be part of this, Amy. Murder is different from fraud." Her reply was chilling. "It's not murder if everyone thinks it's an accident or suicide. Besides, once we have her money, we can leave this place behind. Start fresh somewhere, no one knows us." Jake had captured it all: the planning, the premeditation, the motive. His tablet contained a damning collection of evidence that would be difficult to explain away. "You're amazing. You know that?" I told him, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Most adults wouldn't have thought to gather evidence like this." He shrugged. "I watch a lot of detective shows with Mrs. Wilson next door." The mention of our neighbor brought a pang of homesickness. Our normal life seemed a world away now. "We need to be strategic about how we use this evidence," I explained to Jake. "If we just go to the police now, they might not believe us. Amy and my parents have established their story, and they'll claim all this evidence was fabricated." Jake nodded solemnly. "So what do we do?" "We need to catch them in their own trap," I said, an idea forming. "They think we're dead. That gives us an advantage they don't expect." Using the ranger station's supplies and satellite internet, we began formulating our plan. First, we downloaded and saved all the evidence Jake had collected to multiple secure locations. Then, we researched the legal implications of what my family had done. "Mom, there's something else," Jake said, as evening approached. "I think Travis might help us." He showed me recent messages between Amy and Travis. Travis was clearly becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "They're saying recovery teams will search for the bodies tomorrow. What if they don't find anything? What if they somehow survived?" Amy's dismissive response: "No one could survive that fall. Stop worrying. In a few days, we'll have access to everything." Travis's reply was telling. "This has gone too far. I can't sleep. I keep seeing that little boy's face. He has a conscience," I murmured. "He might be our way in." We spent the night in the relative safety of the ranger station, gathering strength and finalizing our strategy. By morning, I felt strong enough to execute the next phase of our plan. Using the satellite connection, I sent a carefully worded email to Travis from an anonymous account. "I know what happened at Raven's Point. I have evidence that will send you, Amy, Richard, and Linda to prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. Meet me alone at Green Valley Coffee Shop tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you want a chance to save yourself." Within an hour, we received a panicked reply. "Who is this? What evidence? I didn't want any part of this." "Perfect," I said to Jake. "He's scared. Now we just need to get to town without being seen." The ranger station had a utility ATV used for trail maintenance. With Jake's help, I managed to start it using keys we found in a locked cabinet. Our injuries made the journey painful, but the alternative, staying in the wilderness, was worse. We took back roads to avoid the main park entrance, where police and search teams would be concentrated. By nightfall, we reached the outskirts of town and found a small motel where we could clean up and rest. The motel clerk raised eyebrows at our injuries, but I explained we'd had a minor hiking accident and had already seen a doctor. Using cash from the ranger station's emergency fund, I paid for the room without leaving a paper trail. "Tomorrow," I told Jake, as he finally allowed exhaustion to overcome him, "we start fighting back." The Green Valley Coffee Shop was busy with morning customers when Travis arrived. He looked nervous, constantly scanning the room and checking his phone. He chose a corner table with a clear view of both exits. I watched him from a parked car across the street, where Jake and I had positioned ourselves an hour earlier. We'd borrowed clothes from lost and found boxes at the motel to change our appearance slightly. My broken leg was properly splinted now, and Jake's arm was in a proper cast, courtesy of a sympathetic doctor at an urgent care clinic who'd accepted our story about a hiking accident without asking too many questions. "Are you ready?" I asked Jake, who sat beside me with his tablet. He nodded, his face serious. Operation Justice is go. I couldn't help but smile at his terminology despite the gravity of our situation. Somehow, through all of this horror, Jake had maintained his spirit. I texted Travis from the anonymous number. I see you. Order a large coffee and wait. I watched him receive the message, his head jerking up to scan the coffee shop again. He did as instructed, then sat rigidly, waiting. 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up outside the coffee shop. 2 officers entered and approached Travis directly. His face drained of color. The night before, we had sent a carefully curated package of evidence to Detective Sarah Martinez at the local police department, a fosser with an excellent reputation for thoroughness who had no connection to my family. The evidence included Jake's recordings, screenshots of the messages between Amy and Travis, documentation of the life insurance policy taken out without my knowledge, and a detailed account of what had happened on the cliff. We'd asked Detective Martinez to approach Travis first, alone, rather than confronting my family immediately. Our theory was that he would be the weak link, the one most likely to confess when presented with evidence. Through the coffee shop window, I could see Travis's demeanor change from fear to resignation as the detective likely presented him with the evidence we'd provided. Within 20 minutes, he was escorted to the police car. Now for phase 2, I told Jake. We drove to the police station, parking in a spot with a clear view of the entrance. An hour later, Travis emerged with Detective Martinez and several other officers. They got into multiple police cars and drove away. They're going to arrest them, Jake said quietly. Let's make sure of it, I replied, starting the car to follow at a safe distance. The police convoy led us to my parents' house, where we parked down the street to watch. Officers approached the front door while others positioned themselves around the property. Even from a distance, I could see the shock on my mother's face when she opened the door. My father appeared behind her, his expression changing from confusion to anger as he realized what was happening. Amy arrived during the commotion, pulling her car into the driveway only to be immediately approached by officers. Her indignant protests were visible even from our vantage point. All 3 were handcuffed and placed in separate police cars. Now? Jake asked. I nodded. Now. We drove directly to the police station and asked for Detective Martinez. The desk sergeant's eyes widened when I gave my name. But you're supposed to be dead? I finished for him. That was certainly the plan. My son and I would like to make our statements now. The station erupted into activity. Detective Martinez was called back immediately, and medical personnel were summoned to attend to our injuries. The looks of disbelief on everyone's faces would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Detective Martinez was a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened intently as we recounted our ordeal, Jake adding details I'd missed with the precision of someone much older than 6. Your evidence was compelling, she told us. But having you here, alive, changes everything. Travis Hoffman has already confessed to his role and implicated the others. What exactly did he say? I asked. That it was primarily Amy Davis's plan, but your parents were fully on board. They stood to gain control of your assets and a substantial life insurance payout. Travis claims he only knew about the plan to stage an accident days before it happened, but didn't back out when he should have. And my family? What are they saying? Denying everything, of course. Richard and Linda Davis insist it was a tragic accident. Amy is demanding a lawyer and refusing to speak. But with Travis's confession, the evidence you provided, and your testimony, she shook her head. They don't stand a chance. The following days were a whirlwind of medical treatments, formal statements, and legal proceedings. My injuries required surgery, but doctors were optimistic about a full recovery. Jake's arm was properly set, and therapists were brought in to help him process the trauma he'd experienced. The evidence against my family was overwhelming. Beyond what Jake and I had provided, police discovered additional damning materials when they searched my parents' home and Amy's apartment draft obituaries, copies of my business financial records, and notes detailing how they would distribute my assets. Travis accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. Amy, my mother, and my father all maintained their innocence until Travis took the stand during preliminary hearings. Faced with his detailed account and the mountain of evidence, their unified front crumbled. My mother broke first, claiming she'd been coerced by my father and Amy. My father blamed Amy for masterminding the plan. Amy claimed it had all been Travis's idea that spiraled out of control. Their contradicting stories only strengthened the prosecution's case. All three were charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and a host of financial crimes related to their attempts to access my accounts. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom with Jake beside me as sentences were handed down. My parents received 25 years each. Amy, identified as the primary architect of the plot, received 30 years. Travis, due to his cooperation and apparent remorse, received 10 years. As they were led away, my mother finally looked me in the eye. There was no remorse there, only anger at being caught. Amy stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge me at all. My father kept his head down, shoulders slumped in defeat. "Is it really over?" Jake asked as we left the courthouse. "The trial part is," I replied, taking his hand. "Now we focus on healing." The road to recovery was long, both physically and emotionally. My broken bones mended faster than the psychological wounds. How do you come to terms with your own parents trying to kill you and your child for money? The answer, I discovered, was to build something positive from the ashes of that betrayal. With the insurance money from my legitimate policies and a successful lawsuit against my family's estate, I established the Family Betrayal Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of familial financial abuse. Many people, I learned, suffered financial exploitation from family members, though few cases were as extreme as ours. Jake, resilient as always, threw himself into helping with the foundation. At 7, he became our unofficial junior spokesperson, sharing his story with other children affected by family trauma. "The most important family isn't always the one you're born into," he would tell them. "Sometimes it's the one you build yourself." His wisdom continually amazed me. 2 years after the incident, we stood together at a podium, accepting an award for the foundation's work. Jake, now 8, had insisted on speaking. "When my grandparents and aunt pushed us off that cliff, they thought they were ending our story," he said to the hushed audience. "But really, they were just giving us a new beginning. My mom taught me that even when the people who are supposed to love you the most try to hurt you, you still get to choose what happens next." His words brought tears to my eyes and a standing ovation from the crowd. That night, as I tucked him into bed, Jake asked the question he'd never voiced before. "Do you think they ever really loved us?" I considered sugar, coding my answer but decided on honesty. "I don't know, buddy. I think they loved the idea of family, but not the reality of it. Real love doesn't try to possess or control. It doesn't see people as means to an end. Real love protects and nurtures. Like you did for me," he said simply. "Like we did for each other," I corrected him, kissing his forehead. Our story became part of a larger conversation about family dynamics and financial abuse. I wrote a book, published articles, and spoke at conferences, always with Jake by my side, sharing our journey from victims to advocates. The Family Betrayal Foundation grew to provide legal assistance, counseling, and financial support to people escaping toxic family situations. Every success story, every person who found safety and rebuilt their life, felt like a personal victory. 5 years after that terrible day at Ravens Point, Jake and I returned to Blackwater National Park. Not to the cliff, but to the ranger station that had sheltered us in our time of need. We donated funds for renovation and new emergency equipment, ensuring it would continue to be a haven for others in crisis. "Do you ever miss having a bigger family?" I asked Jake as we drove home. He considered this seriously, as he did all questions. "No," he finally said. "Our family is exactly the right size. Plus, we have all the foundation people now. That's like having the world's biggest, weirdest extended family." I laughed, amazed once again by his perspective. "You're right. Family is what we make it." That night, looking at my son sleeping peacefully, I reflected on our journey. From that moment of betrayal, that literal fall, we had built something beautiful and meaningful. The people who should have loved us most had tried to destroy us, but in surviving, we had discovered a strength and purpose we might never have found otherwise. Sometimes the greatest betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations, not because of the pain itself, but because of how we choose to respond to it. Jake and I had chosen to turn our tragedy into triumph, our pain into purpose, and in doing so, we had created a legacy of hope far more valuable than any inheritance my family had tried to steal. Have you ever had to rebuild your trust in others after someone close to you betrayed you? How did you find the strength to move forward? I believe sharing our stories helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If our journey touched you in any way, please consider commenting below. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of hope and resilience, please share this video with them. Every like and subscribe helps us reach more people who need to know they aren't alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to our story. And remember, family is who loves you, not necessarily who you're related to.